OIKURA Sadachi. That character. Holy fucking shit. Base NISIO ISIN went in crafting this character. I'll say that first. But this episode, the chills on top of the feels that I had for Sodachi's character were heavily evoked from that incredible performance by MARINA INOUE, dude. I have to give her a round of applause. I have to give her a round of applause. The ghastly air of that dialogue, the intonations, the tone shifts with, it was absolutely crazy. I went from feeling that this girl, had this deep sense of self-loathing and was just utterly insane to seeing the psychosis and the sociopathic nature of her, to then realizing, the trauma and how broken she truly is and how dark her backstory was, dude. And the feels on top of just the chills I got watching this performance, from the cinematography to the dialogue. It was, oh my god, MARINA INOUE, though. I have to say this before going in. Bear with me because this video is probably going to be long. I want to go a little bit in depth with the dialogue. Easily in the top 10 voice acting performances for this year of anime. Just done for me. Done. Straight up. And best voice acting performance this season so far. Just done. And this is easily her best role as well that I've seen. Just holy fucking shit. The way that those lines were handled. Oh my god. Like, watching this episode, I was utterly wrapped up and engrossed in Sodachi's character, but at the same time there was this aversion where I couldn't even wholly bring myself to see her, because it was just so, just as she spoke about, the weight of happiness, the darkness surrounding her persona and her past and her outlook and perspective were weighing heavily on me, on top of the feels I had for just like Hanakawa, the fucking babe in the corner, sympathizing and empathizing with her heavily, as she knows what it's like to become from a broken house a little as well. But let's dive into the episode. Owarimonogatari Greatness, episode 5. Sodachi Loss continues. I'm gonna say this right now. We can get into some theory crafting, because there's a couple ways things can go as far as Sodachi's, mother is concerned. And I'm going to say this right now. I'm going to talk about it more in depth and what markers I see that actually lead me to this conclusion a bit later in the video. But Sodachi's mother's dead. She's fucking dead. It's just done. Nobody's spoiling me, though, but that's just what I gleaned from this episode, alright? But I want to talk about some of the smaller points and a little bit of the comedy at the beginning before we get into the heavy dialogue of Sodachi and some of the words Aragi and, Hanakawa utter as well. So first of all, one thing I have to point out, when her cheek was fucking, it was so fucking adorable, seeing her in her pajamas at first, and she's stuttering over, Aragi's name, which kind of, there was a sharp pain in my heart at that moment, because I kind of felt that Moyoi vibe just kind of resurging when she was kind of flubbing her speech and whatnot. I was just like, oh my god, my girl, I miss her so much. But it's alright, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but we haven't seen the last of the beautiful Hachikuji. But anyway, I digress. During that scene where she was talking about complaining about what Senjigahara did and everything like that, and Aragi pricks himself and swipes some of his vampiric infused blood on her, and she heals instantly. I had no, we all know about Aragi's healing factor and everything like that, but I had no idea that, and as a matter of fact, I probably should have thought about it based on Shinobu, but I had no idea he could actually utilize his blood to heal other people like that. So that was just a quick mark that I instantly picked up, and I feel like I did know about it based on stuff, like I said, with my best girl Shinobu, but it's something that really, that struck me watching this episode. Secondly, we get to see fucking Nadeko, dude. I have to admit, like, Nadeko, I love every Monogatari girl, and though Nadeko is a bit lower on the list compared to some others, it was still amazing to see her. You could, even though, you see that normal Nadeko vibe of just being utterly, enthralled in having a conversation with Koyomi and being on the phone with him and everything like that, flirting with him subtly and everything, you could see the subtle thread of jealousy over the fact that he was asking and inquiring about OIKURA. But finding out about that other element and going back even further to when Aragi's parents actually picked up Sadachi and whatnot and were protecting her for quite some time, and to know that they went back that far, even though they never really exchanged words, as Sadachi says later, and I'll get into it, where she's like, I just kept silently glaring at all of you. They're still childhood friends, and you see that set up in there. So as a member of the Aragi harem, Sadachi already has her place, and seeing the way that he goes about trying to save her in this episode, it's done. But aside from that, last thing I need to say before we dive into Sadachi's character and everything, and the dialogue, because I just want to, it's going to be story time. I just want to read some of that dialogue and really think about what it means, and then start theory crafting about what I see for the rest of this arc. But based on God, dude, the babe, dude, like, yo, snatching up the coffee in midair, just, and then when Sadachi goes for it the second time, you just see her in the corner with all three of them just stacked up with the smile. I'm just like, yo, she's like, I couldn't stop Senju Gahara, she couldn't stop Gahara-san that then, so she's like, yo, I came prepared this time. I'm just like, yo, the babe's too real, she's too real. But aside from that, let us dive into what made this episode, because I've been as much as I've loved diving into the eerie vibe of Ougi, and we all know I spent the first 4 episode reviews of Owari, theory crafting about Ougi, and everybody knows where I stand on her and all the hints I've pointed out at this point. But I wanted to move away from that and actually really dive in to this new character, Sadachi, and getting into it, yo. Depending on the resolution of this arc, she very well could surpass some of the girls on my tiers for this series, and that's great. Yo, Sadachi, I never would have thought, even with her performance in the prior episodes, that I would, you know, feel for this character so much and get so engrossed in her persona. But let's dive in. The way I see her, from her psychological state, she's damaged at this point, and the very fact that there's something shady about the dialogue surrounding her mother, to the point where I can't put my finger on whether her mother just straight up died, and I'll dive into that possibility, or if she actually killed her herself, which I think that's less likely. It would be utterly fiendish and dark if it turns out that Sadachi murdered her mother, but I don't think that is the case. I think her mother straight up died, and I'll get into that in a second. But let's just dive into some of the dialogue that makes me think this. First of all, what she says about the house multiple times. The room was pitch black when she entered it. The fact that the mother had stopped eating all the food that she made from her, that there was garbage on top of garbage in the house and everything was rotting like that. And when Aragi asks her later on, why didn't you just stay in that house, she's like, because it was a place filled with garbage. It felt better to toss out the entire house rather than attempt to clean up at that point, dude. That plus the whole locked room scenario and everything like that, I think that Sadachi's mother straight up died in that room, and that she was so scarred by that she completely blocked it out and continued to, you know, and thought and just invented this whole idea of her mother running away on her and everything like that, which is fucked, is utterly fucked, and I could easily see that being the case. But oh my goodness, it's too real, and that I feel as though that's the conclusion we're going to come to. I'm going to rope back around to this because I want to get into some of the other dialogue, though. The handful of lines that really got me in this episode were, first of all, when she was saying these lines. It would be better if my mother was gone, was something I've never once thought. This is the one thing that's true, because I was praying every night that it would be better if my mother was gone, was something I wouldn't wish for. And when she repeated it over and over and over again, just that culmination where she's like, but one day my mother was gone against my wishes. And, you know, the little text frames were done perfectly and handled perfectly in this episode in terms of providing, you know, another layer of context to the dialogue. But it was crazy, and one of those frames that Aragi kind of pieces together, and I believe it's his mentality, you know, in these frames, is OIKURA says that killing emotions and slaughtering her own heart. And it's that slaughtering her own heart line that makes me kind of see the possibility and potential for her to have actually had a hand in her mother's death and have actually murdered her mother, because deep down, no matter what, in the darkest corridor, no matter how much she wanted to and prayed for her never to wish for her mother not to be there, clearly she did, because it was such a heavy thing on her mind. And there was always a thin thread of resentment, even in how she talked about her parents and putting them both as a villain. And when she started getting into the dialogue about her parents, she's like, the male parent, not even calling her father, calling, you know, him her father, the male parent, that scumbag. I utterly despise him, dude. Fucking despising everything, and the way that hatred and despising things was used in this episode, that dialogue and the play off of words was incredible, dude. But OIKURA says that killing emotions and slaughtering her own heart, dude, yo, it could lead to many other possibilities. But then getting into that backstory and everything like that, where she was first there, and she was like, it was almost as if you guys were showing off. To see this bright and happy household, it shattered her perception of what she thought was the norm, dude, to the point where she didn't know what to do. Her life was utterly transformed at that moment. And as she says, it was so bright, that's why I ran away. I silently kept glaring at you. That's why I silently kept glaring. And she's like, do you remember that? And Aragi says, yes, although he's lying, and we see that flame of that being a lie. And that leads into that loss and gap of his memories, which is so stark, and something that's come up even before Owari, with, you know, him forgetting Nadeko and everything like that. Lots of threads in his memory being missing. And I think, going back to my Ougi theories, that's tied up in the subconscious apparition of Ougi. But we'll, you know, if you don't know about my Ougi theories, just check out another video. I want to keep this focused on Sadachi. But the dialogue where she's like, it was so bright, that's why I ran away. I was blinded by the brightness, and it felt like my eyes would be crushed. My body was going to be crushed by that warmth and comfort. Dude, Nisio, the dialogue, the writing, the metaphor, it's too real. It's too deep. And on top of the incredible performance by Inoue, it was just, oh my goodness, Sadachi's character felt so visceral. Dude, it was incredible. I have to say, this episode blew me away simply because of Sadachi's dialogue, dude. And then, as a result of that, there's some dialogue that leads me into even darker threads of possibilities as far as the abuse in her household goes. Because she says this, you know, I tried strange things in strange ways in order to fix it, but that only resulted in them seeing me as rebellious and being beaten more. Where it wouldn't be seen on me, the parts of me that weren't visible were all pummeled. And that's fucked up in and of itself, but I don't want to get too much into the implications of what that statement can mean, but if you really think about it, it could be so... If it goes that deep and is that real like that, it could be so fucked up. So I'm not going to get into that, just for the sake of keeping things somewhat PG and somewhat lighthearted in a very dark episode. But it could even be, the implications of that line could even be to another level entirely, is all I'll say about that. And then the whole thread of destiny throughout the episode and her link to Aragi and everything like that. And then this line of dialogue is something that truly gets me. This whole block where she's like, it's my fault. I despise myself. I hate myself. If I don't blame you, Aragi, I can't keep going. I'm sorry, but please be my villain. I can't recover if my parents are the only villains I blame. Dude, yo. And needless to say, this all culminates in this kind of warped psychology that, you know, Sadachi has developed as a result of the abuse and the trauma that she suffered in her youth. And this sense of self-loathing, this sense of blocking off happiness and despising herself truly, which kind of mirrors as well Aragi's line where he's like, even though I'm happy right now, I despise myself a little bit. And Ougi says, that little bit is how much I love you, which kind of ties into something, and once again is my hint for this particular episode of the link between Ougi and Aragi, which I'll get into in a second, right? But then Hanakawa steps in, having heard all of this, and we know my girl Tsubasa's and her family situation and everything like that. And her words hold weight because of that, especially because during the dialogue, you could see the emotion and the feels for Sadachi running high in her. And she says, you're not happy because you're not trying to be happy. People who do not want to be happy won't be happy. And Sadachi's like, you're right. That's the true answer. My eyes, my body, they'd be crushed. I couldn't bear the weight of happiness. Instead of being happy after all of this, I'd rather be steeped ankle deep in lukewarm unhappiness and bear all of it. I want to keep my shoes soaking wet for as long as I live. Yo, that one, you just spaced NISIO, dude. Oh my goodness. That shit was real. But Aragi's reply is, so as Hanako says, perfect, the perfect reply, the best thing he could have possibly said, and it also is wholly in line with his persona and his character and who we know Aragi to be, and trying to save, you know, Sadachi after hearing all of this. And he's like, no happiness, there is no happiness that is too heavy. All kinds of happiness are perfect for you. And then when he goes into this line where he's like, don't despise happiness, don't despise the world, don't despise anything and everything, don't despise yourself. All the types of despise within your body, I'll accept all of them for you. All the types of hatred that you feel, I will put them on myself. I'll accept them all. So I want you to love yourself more. You can despise me as much as you want, at least as much as I used to love you before. It was a text illustration that popped up. And that line right there is the tie that I was talking about between that and the line between him and Ougi a couple episodes prior. Dude, the implications of that and what would have happened had Ougi actually accompanied Aragi to visit Sadachi instead of Hanakawa. Who knows how she would have tried to spin it. And at the same time, the very fact that there are certain key portions of perception and parts of his memory, and this is going back into my Ougi theories, that kind of Aragi is missing and Ougi has, showcases her being the subconscious appearance of apparition of Aragi's subconscious and everything like that. So that's all I'm going to get into as far as that's concerned. But this episode, man, Sadachi, the dialogue, it was too real. The voice acting was incredible. And I can't wait to see what happens next, because had Ougi been on scene, I'm sure she would have firsthand, right there, pointed out the fact and discovered the fact that, you know, Sadachi's mother is in fact dead. Hanakawa was even subtly trying to get to that conclusion. I don't think she's even fully grasped it, but I can't see it going any other way. I can't see her mother having truly been alive and left, especially with the deterioration of her mentality and seeing what had happened to her and the story that Sadachi was outlining. She had given up the will to live, and she probably died straight up in that room. And for all we know, it could be as fucked up as Sadachi kept going in there day after day and bringing the dead body food. And the trauma was so much to the point where it's all been blocked out and erased from her personal memory, and she chose not to face it and turn away from it. But I wholly believe from others that if it turns out, based on that one piece of dialogue, that could have implications as to it, of that Sadachi actually murdered her own mother, I don't know if there's redemption for the character in terms of her actually, you know, going forward and moving. Like, I feel as though we'll move away from this character entirely if that's the case, and she'll have to come at the end of this arc, have to come to terms with that fact, and then we'll see then. Either way, I don't know how readily, you know, Sadachi, even though I foresee some sort of resolution, I don't know how readily Sadachi and Aragi are going to, you know, forge a bond and her to become like a regular member of the harem, especially since, you know, this is a late game of the series. But Sadachi lost. Finally, an episode outside of Ougi, and it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. So that's pretty much all I want to talk about with this episode. I didn't get too much into, you know, the cinematography with this one because the dialogue was the big thing for me with this episode. Next week, you know, we'll see how it goes. Mostly, I'll focus wherever I feel is most important. I don't want these videos to be, you know, 30 minutes long with me having to touch every single facet. So I decided to table, you know, what Shaft did with cinematography and service of the dialogue, but it was still beast. It was fucking amazing, dude. Especially certain shots of Sadachi. The head tilt game was on some new tier. They were going in. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on this episode of Owarimonogatari Greatness. And I'm out. Peace.